in the regional science fair or the regional expo. Now, the regional expo or the projects at regional science fair are of a higher standard than the district expo projects. Some of our participants have truly pushed the boundaries when we looked at some of the projects at the district expo. Prizes and medals are awarded to top winners at the regional science fair, and for those exceptional projects, there is an exciting prospect of being chosen to advance to the International Science Fair during the October holiday in Boksburg as well. So that is an opportunity for some of our learners. Now, being part of the process, some of you were part of the DE selectors that took place during May, and now we basically in a new process preparing to be a regional expo judge. So at the district expo, as part of the selected team, you use the learner feedback form and the selector report to provide constructive feedback and guidance to a learner and to determine the status of the project. But at the regional science fair, the project type assessment form, and later on you will see the different project type assessment forms, is used to score a project. And the ethics report becomes very vital for verifying the ethics compliance. Then secondly, at the district expo, incomplete projects were accepted, but at the regional science fair, only complete and maybe say well-developed projects will be presented, and we will actually score them at the regional science fair. At the district expo during May, remember you were in this one room, everybody working together, so you were part of a general team. But at the regional science fair, you will actually form part of a specific category and normally aligned with your speciality. Though this can sometimes be adjusted based on the number of entries in each category, so we need your specialities or expertise. A key responsibility at the regional science fair is a thorough understanding of what constitutes a truly exceptional expo project. And that is why we present this evening and make sure everybody have a common understanding of what are we looking for. Lastly, at the district expo, when we interviewed the learners, the interview was used to assess if the project has any potential going forward. But now at the regional science fair, we have two processes. The one is the pre-judging and the second one is the interview. And this process is a much more in-depth aiming to precisely assess the project's merit and to determine the appropriate medal for that particular project. So in order, we will use a different form, assessment form and an ethics report. We will look at complete projects. You will work in a specific category. You need to understand what are we looking for, and the two processes will be handled this evening, pre-judging as well as the interview. So that is the difference between the district expo and the regional science fair that's coming up. So the judging team that you're part of now is basically different team members, and the most important person is the judging coordinator. And as previously mentioned, Olga is allocated this title as judging coordinator. Then there's also chief judges that will be on the floor and that will assist the process. Then each category will have a convener. So we hope to appoint 13 conveners. Sometimes we appoint more, especially in certain categories where we have a lot of projects that's entered, and then we need two conveners in certain categories. Then the judges, and we call them category judges. That is all of you that will be on the floor as looking and assessing the projects. Then we have another team, the project display and safety approval team. Now, this team is part of the judging process, but they're not really working with you. They prepare the process for you to continue. Then there's the project ethics team that assist as well and look at if everything is in order. And then there's the person that's basically doing all the data capturing, the judges, administrator. So this is basically the team that you will see that will be working together to ensure that we give the correct medal for each project during our upcoming regional science fair. Now, as a judge, the question is, which tools must a good expo judge have in their bag to assist us in this process? The first one, definitely, remember you a volunteer, okay? But you need to be professional. We need you to be reliable. We need you to prepare and be committed. Now, prepare meaning, please see, and we mentioned it already about reading the judge's manual. Prepare yourself for the upcoming session. Then definitely you work well as part of a team. Then you must have adequate knowledge to judge in a specific category. And remember, it's the one that you selected, that you feel this is my speciality. And then, as a judge, you need to be fair and objective. Judge the project and not the child. And that is important that we don't look at whose project it is. We don't look at the school. We look at the project and we assess the project that's in front of us. Then follow a child-centered approach. Be sensitive. Be empathetic. Understand children. Okay? Be unbiased when we work with them. Then assess learner according to his or her development. Remember, mentioned earlier, we're working with grade 6 up to grade 12 learners that's presenting. And I think it's only grade 7 to grade 11 learners that's participating in Cape Town, to be corrected, but you can see the difference that we've got. So please, no unrealistic expectations from you as a judge. Then listen actively. Be non-judgmental. Be unbiased. Be fair. And we need you to show objective behavior. As a judge, it's always good to communicate, and please use positive verbal and positive non-verbal communication skills. It's the message that the learner will take away for the rest of his life, for the rest of the year, but also let them also enjoy this process of being part of Expo. As a judge, you need to be aware of how judging process affect the learners, especially when it comes to the interview. You'll see that some of them are very anxious when you're busy with their interviews. So please put them at ease when you with them. And most important, leave learners on a positive note after the interview. They must feel when you walk away, they encourage and they must feel that they've been respected. So looking at all of this, this is what we suggest that you put as part of your tool bag when you come and assist us on the 19th of August at UCT. Very important that we need some documents. As I mentioned earlier, the Expo Judging Manual has already been shared with you. Please do take some time to read through the document. It contains all the essential information you need. And then it is expected of judges to sign the necessary documents, and it's the judge's pledge, non-disclosure agreement, declaration of conflict of interest, and code of conduct before they can begin judging a project. This ensures everything is in order before the judging commences. So please make sure that everything is in order. Then again, please read and sign all documents prior to the assessment process. Then, with regards to the project display and safety approval team, remember I mentioned they also in this area, but all research projects must comply with Expo display and safety regulations. Now, to assist us with this, that is the role of a member of the project display and safety approval team. They will inspect the project display, complete this form that you see, and the form will be on the table, and this will ensure compliance before you as a judge come to the project. So that is why it is important to look for this document when you get to a project. That is my story for this evening. I hand over to Olga.
Thank you very much, Lyndon, and welcome to 67 judges. I am so pleased that you are here tonight. We have a huge number of judges this year. Obviously, we haven't allocated anybody yet because of the entries not being in, but I'm really glad to see so many people here. Let's go straight into it. What are we doing as judges? What is our reason for being involved? Obviously, it's a competition, but it's to objectively assess the projects. So we set aside our personal opinions when we come to the projects that we've been allocated. And there will be times where you might not like the content, but because we're assessing objectively, everything should work out. So we're looking at work done by learners, as Lyndon said, grade 6 to, I think there's a grade 12. We're using a fixed assessment sheet that's used all over South Africa. And obviously we have to have an understanding of what a project is and how the assessment works. And as I've said earlier, please put your questions in the chat. Somebody will assist you. And then afterwards you could email us. But while you're at Expo, you will have some project managers called conveners, and they will be your first person to talk to. Thank you, Lyndon. So let's just take a step back to what Expo is all about. It's a competition. There are 13 categories, very scientific categories, including engineering and maths and social sciences. And the learners must choose one of those project categories. And there are 4 types of projects. So we've got engineering or computers, we've got maths, we've got scientific investigation, and we've got social sciences. Those are types of projects, and they could fit into any category. So we need to understand that there are 2 separate things you're going to be looking at when you're assessing the projects. Thank you, Lyndon. So there are assessment forms for those types of projects. The learners have selected the research plans and reports using the Expo templates of the 4 types, and you as a judge will get one of those or more of those to assess at Expo. Now, we don't change the type. Once the learner has selected that type, then we use the correct assessment form. And the idea is that those assessment forms have been set up, tried, and tested over the years and have seen to be successful as a form of assessing the worth of the project. As Lyndon said, we're now in a strictly competitive round of Expo, the second one. So we are using the assessment form. And before I forget, this assessment form is not to be shared with the learners or anybody, please. It's strictly an Expo document. Thank you, Lyndon. So let's just go through the project types in a little bit more detail. So the scientific investigation is probably the most common type of project done, partly because the scientific method is chosen, taught many times at school over from grade 6 to grade 12. So the learners are most comfortable with that type of project. They know what a hypothesis and variables are. They know how to get to conclusions using data. So that's one we will come across in a great portion of the categories, the 13 categories. Then there's the engineering/computer science type of project, which is completely different. And while some learners might confuse the two, they are very much about design and testing and redesigning. So not with hypothesis and not with variables. Thank you, Lyndon. Now, the social science projects obviously are all about humans, human behavior, social issues, and all other things related to humans, education studies, for example. So they have a different way of generating data and analyzing data. And often there is both qualitative and quantitative data to work with, or quantitative results to work with. And so the social scientists kind of need to look at this in quite a different way. Now, generally, okay, the engineering type of projects are in the engineering category, the social science type of projects are in the social science category, and the mathematics type of projects are in the mathematics category. But that is not a hard and fast rule. And then looking at maths, there are 1 or 2 maths projects, which we are very pleased to see, because it is quite something to take on a maths project. They are very much about numbers, quantities, structure, space, and so on, statistics, and so on. They have a fairly similar route, but they're definitely a different kind of project. Thank you, Lyndon. So we are at a face-to-face expo. Your judging will take place on Tuesday, the 19th of August. And what will happen is when you arrive, you will see the projects have already been set up by the learners, and the PDSA, the project approval team, has already reviewed the display. And then that is where your work starts. So the category judges are you, and you will actually be looking at the projects. You'll be assigned projects, and we would actually like to start next week assigning projects to you. So please, that's why we want to know if you are committed or not able to come as soon as possible, because once we assign projects to people, it's awful to try and change it around. And then your job, once you've looked at the content, is to interview the learners, to ask them questions about things you didn't quite get in the written project, or where you need to know more. You will also, apart from doing the interview, you will also look to see if there are any ethics violations. In other words, have they overstepped something? And all of this is going to be explained today. Each project will be assessed by a minimum of 2 judges separately, please, never together. Okay, and then right at the end of the process, the judges will get together and discuss the final scores in a panel, and we'll explain more about that. The convener, the category manager, will collect all the score sheets and the scores on their computer. And then right at the end, any terrible ethics, human testing without supervision or permission, will be referred to a different group of people called the chief judges. As Lyndon has pointed out, they standardize the results, and one of their not so nice jobs is to look at the ethical violations as well. Thank you, Lyndon. Okay, so you will get two documents, the assessment form and the ethics report. And the idea is you will start working on both during your pre-judging, which will be on the morning of Tuesday, the 19th of August. You will be assigned your projects, you will get these sheets, you will fill them in and get as far as you can by lunchtime. You will hand the ethics reports in so that we can look at them and start capturing what score you gave, and I'll explain more. And then you will finish the assessment sheet when you talk to the learners later in the day. Thank you, Lyndon. Let's just have a quick look at what you can expect. Now, Lyndon said we want complete Expo projects. So this is the contents with the background poster of a complete Expo project. So there is a report, the big document that gives the detail of every single part of the project. There is an official documents file in which the abstract research plan and the other documents about plagiarism and ethics are there. There is their personal journal, 1 or 2 learners, by the way, no more than 2. Their journal can be handwritten or typed, which is lovely, and the poster. If there's an engineering project, we're obviously looking for a small version of the prototype on the table as well. Thank you, Lyndon. Okay, so the first part of the expo on the morning of the 19th of August, so we're doing all the judging in one day this year, is called pre-judging. Now, judges, we've asked you to arrive at UCT Sports Centre at 7 o'clock in the morning, because by 8:30, we must be on the floor doing the pre-judging. There are no learners there. There are no parents. There are no teachers. They're just the judges, groups of judges. And you will assess up to 76 marks of all the written work. You will do it on your own. And if you need any help, there's always a convener walking around assisting you with any questions you've got. And that's a very good time to answer questions. Later in the day, after lunch, the grade 6 to 9 will come, learners, and you will interview them and get those results out the way. And then you will later in the day interview the grade 10 to 12 learners, and then those results will come in. So in other words, the process is the pre-judging, the interviews, and the finalizing of the assessment sheet. And the idea is that you could discuss the scores in the group to finalize the mark, and we'll show you more. Thank you, Lyndon. So now let's actually look at assessing a project. But before we go into the project, this is what we want at the Regional Expo. This wasn't what you didn't see. Those of you who are selected, it's not what you saw at the district. This is what we want here at the regional. So we need a very clear aim, the whole purpose of doing this project, the reason for choosing the topic. Obviously, knowledge of that topic itself, in other words, from all the background reading, and understanding of what you've chosen as a learner. Then we're looking for some thorough research. Not one test, not one survey, but multiples of everything. Not one prototype, but 3. And lots of evidence to back everything up. So recorded process of recording results, getting results, using them to back up ideas. Lots of good science. So this is something that's not instinctive at school, but hopefully if the learners follow the templates we've been giving them, and they've been given multiple times, to schools. And remember, we started with our workshops in January already. So there are multiple opportunities to get everything right in terms of a document. And then, of course, there is a place to show some creativity and originality and value. And on top of that, understanding where the limits are. Now, if you consider that some learners started maybe only in April with their project, you can see the limitation would be time and how they explain it. We're looking for some original ideas. Those are the ones that should do very well because they come up with something new and novel. And of course, what we really would like is real world application. Now, not everybody can save the world, but we're hoping a lot of projects show the real world use of their research. It's not going to just go into a cupboard after Expo. Thank you, Lyndon. Okay, so there is the assessment form. The assessment forms look quite similar, but they're not identical. Okay, but the front of the assessment form we'll show you just now is identical. Each type of project, scientific investigation, engineering / computer, mathematical / theoretical, and social sciences have their own assessment sheet. Now, we haven't been seeing theoretical projects. And if you do come across one, it's one that needs a lot of understanding where learners are actually using data that's not their own. So we will address that separately, probably at Expo. Okay. Every judging sheet has the same score range. 0, not done, no evidence, very badly incorrect. 1 has made an attempt and is trying their best, but not doing particularly well. 2 is like the middle of this. It's sort of well done, but there are a few errors. 3 is good, and of course the 4 are them that have gone way past a normal project. And you will pick that up quite quickly when you start judging at the Expo. Thank you, Lyndon. So the top of the assessment forms all look the same, but you can see the one says scientific investigation, the other one says engineering, and of course there's a maths one and a social science one. And this section is identical, but the little subsections are the ones that are not the same. So let's have a look. The names of the learners will go in the top. Their project title, we've said a maximum of 10 words. Their grade, their region obviously is Cape Town. Their category, they chose the category. And remember, we can't change it. It stays as that. And every project gets a unique number. And you will see that in the program when you get one on the 19th. Now you can see below points 1 to 5 are basically what you will see without the learners. When you do pre-judging, that adds up to 76 marks. And then the last 24 marks are obviously when the learner comes and you talk with him. So effectively, if a learner didn't come, they could still get the 76 marks. But we have told the learners they must be there. So we will see what happens. We just hope they all come. Okay, generally, if they put up a project, they will be there, unless there's an illness or something. Then you will see an initial mark. That will be the mark that you personally give that project. That is not the overall final mark. So then what you do is, as a team, let's say the category of agricultural science, you'll be sitting and you'll be looking at all the scores together and coming up with a final mark. And that is the mark that the project is assigned. You will also write your name, please don't sign, and your convener's name, and the date will always be the 19th of August, 2025. Now, this, please, is confidential. So the minute marks are assigned, please don't discuss it with anybody, even in the same panel, and definitely don't discuss it with anybody else. And there will be teachers on site. There will be possibly parents on site, although we generally only accept not parents, but We are actually love to have a variety of judges. And you will find when you get your judges panel, you won't recognize everybody because there'll be people from all over Cape Town and further. Thank you, Lyndon. Okay, so we've looked at the subheadings, but I just want to look at the scores again. So the introduction is obviously 3 subsections worth 12, method 16, the chunky one, the results, discussion, conclusion, and so on, 28, over a quarter of the project mark. And this is very much where the learners start showing who they are. Then there's 12 marks for originality, creativity, value, and that's really where a good project will score. There are 8 marks for the referencing and so on. And lastly, the 24 marks assessed at the interview. And so you can actually see we've tried over the years to balance the proportions here. And therefore, it all adds up to 100. Thank you, Lyndon. Okay, so pre-judging. Remember, no learners. You've arrived at 7 o'clock. Please bring your coffee mug and water bottle. You'll have a breakfast snack and you'll have a quick allocation with your convener and then be sent out to start looking at projects. Can I suggest the new judges who've never judged before, go with a convener and look at a project together before you start. That might be a very nice way to start. But pre-judging is before the interviews. So what I'm aiming to do, because we were asked this at the district expos, I'm aiming to get the topics out to the different categories via the conveners. So you could actually have a look at that topic before you come. Now we've asked for descriptive titles. Let's hope we get them. I'm sorry, but at UCT, there isn't just general Wi-Fi. So if you're a UCT member of staff, you're fine. But if you're not a UCT member of staff, there won't be Wi-Fi. You will have to use data. So this is why we want to get the topics out beforehand. Right, so now you go and look for that topic and you think, hang on, there is plagiarism here. Somebody has copied, there's Gone with the Wind. I love the humor in this. Can you imagine if somebody tried to write that book again? So even if you find plagiarism, obviously there will be place to take notes. You need to continue to assess the project. So all projects get assessed regardless of whether you think there's AI use, copying, whatever. The marks will come in at the end, and then there will be decisions about the plagiarism or any other problems. Thank you, Lyndon. Okay. Also, when you're pre-judging, you're going to sit on your own at the table like that judge is doing, and you will have the documents in front of you, research plan, abstract, and report, and of course the assessment form. So you can start with the research plan to get a good idea of their thinking at the beginning of the project. But of course, their thinking might have changed since they started. So don't assume that if that was their hypothesis at the beginning, that that's got to be the hypothesis throughout the project. It's a plan. It's literally a plan. Some judges, however, go the other route and they start the abstract first. And they then say, hang on, this is what they're showing me is the key finding. So maybe this is a good place to start. What you'll do is you'll find yourself while you're prejudging the first project anyway. Thank you, Lyndon. Okay, so we've said there were 4 types of projects. There is a scoring of a maximum of 4 marks per little 25 little subcategories. We will talk mainly today about scientific investigation and engineering. Social sciences, we're not going to be able to discuss, otherwise we're going to be here till 10 o'clock. So we've just done a very interesting section with the learners where we went through scientific investigations, engineering projects, and social science projects. And so we will have the recording of the social science available for you to look at. And I actually did that one. I went through the assessment sheet with them. Okay, so here we are. Let's go on, please, Lyndon. Okay, so the scientific investigation projects, as I've said, are the most common simply because everybody's taught that at natural science, physical science, and life science. So they pretty well know it. Okay, they follow the hypothesis, the method, they test the hypothesis, and then they get some results and they analyze those to reach the conclusion. So it's a fairly standard way of doing a project. Now, that last bullet is where we're really concerned. Is there a well-stated hypothesis that can be followed and tested? Are the three different types of variables mentioned: the independent variable, the dependent variable, and the controlled or fixed variables? Is there evidence of repeated testing for reliable results? And of course, is there a conclusion? So when you go through a scientific investigation project, you're actually going to find it's fairly straightforward. Thank you, Lyndon. Let's look at the introduction. So there are three little subsections, and those, each one of them gets marked separately. So let's say you give 4 for point 1, you don't have to give 4 for 2 and 4 for 3. Okay, so the key concepts are introduced, whatever they are, based on that project, providing a good background to the topic, and the relevant literature are reviewed. Now, they might not be set out in exactly the same order as the assessment form, although we've told the learners it's a good idea to go in the order of the assessment form. So you're going to be in the prejudging doing quite a lot of reading of the introduction in the report. Finding the problem, issue, or phenomenon, the purpose or aim, and the research question should be there. Most learners will put it under a little subheading. Now notice that all of those in point 2 are worth the 4 marks. So it's not like each one of them can be added up to something. But it will be very easy if one of them is missing, because you then can't give 4. And then lastly, the hypothesis is testable or falsifiable and includes the variables. So this is where a lot of the variables and so on will be mentioned. Now, we've written in red there. Sometimes the learners put all of this in the research plan and then forget to copy it across to the report. So if you find things are missing in the report, please go back to the research plan. We want to give the learner the benefit of the marks. We want to show them that we have read all of their work during prejudging and not just the report. Thank you, Lyndon. Okay, so now the method, of course, is the actual process by which the project was done. So we're looking, by the way, in the past tense because it's a report rather than the research plan, which is in the future tense. But I wouldn't get too bogged down by this because the little ones especially are learning processes rather than being on top of things like past tense, future tense, third person, and so on. Let's have a look at the subsections. You might find the different parts in a different order. That's why it says, please read the method through. Okay, treatments variables are shown. So here they are, but they might actually be mentioned with the hypothesis in the introduction. It does not matter. Just give them the marks if they're there. Okay, materials and apparatus are listed in a more modern way. The learners put the materials and the apparatus in the method. So don't just penalize because there wasn't a beautiful list. Old school. When we all used to do it as a part of our experiment, we had a little list of 3 test tubes and so on. It's often not done like that anymore. It's often done within the method. Okay. Procedure clearly indicates how they were going to generate and collect the results. So sort of towards the end of the method, there should be at least recording the results in a table. Okay. And there you would see the units of measurement. And again, the method has to be read through a couple of times before you can start allocating these marks. And then, of course, the number of trials, tests, replications. Now, if you were a selector at the District Expo, and a lot of selectors are here. It's wonderful to see your names, by the way. Then you will see, of course, that at the very beginning, we only had maybe one trial, one set of questionnaires, whatever. So you might have to think, okay, now by this stage, they should have done multiple trials. Thank you, Lyndon. Let's look at the future, the next big chunk. Accurate data represented appropriately in tables, graphs, and so on. So you could get a table, a graph, and an analysis on one page. A lot of learners follow that method rather than doing 10 tables, 10 graphs, and analyzing them all. So again, there's a lot of reading of this report backwards and forwards, looking for that. Were the graphs analyzed correctly? Okay. Were the variables discussed? Now, I often find this is the one where a lot of learners don't actually go and discuss the variables, the effect of the independent variable and so on. Okay, and then of course they should be showing some patterns and so on in the discussion. Notice those both part of point 10. Point 11, at some place they should be referring back to the aim or hypothesis, because of course that's the thread through the whole project, that they're still sticking to that hypothesis. And of course the value of their results. Again, as I said, we've given them these sheets, so hopefully they are checking them out and making it easy for you to find them. Citing literature and comparing findings. This is probably a skill that's more like in the grade 10s and 11s, but who knows? The grade 6s and 7s might come up with this. It's quite difficult to learn how to reference. So we will be lenient to some extent, but if they don't cite literature and compare the findings, you know what score to give. It's just a 0. Okay, limitations and errors are stated, as well as further improvements. Some of them do it in one paragraph. So you just read it and see what is the limitation, what's the error, and what's the future. And then lastly, obviously the discussion would refer back to the hypothesis. Is it accepted or supported or rejected with some of the key findings? And then, of course, the conclusion is given. So there are some findings needed for number 14. You wouldn't just say, hypothesis supported, my conclusion is restating the hypothesis. That wouldn't get you 4. So this is where you start seeing, okay, a learner actually went and got the key findings and used them to support the hypothesis. That is a very good conclusion. Thank you, Lyndon. Okay, so I've spoken a lot about the results already. Okay, and everything must be very clearly set out. Now, just remember, please, everybody, that Excel is not a natural for every child. A lot of schools only introduce Excel in grade 7. So, yeah, sorry, grade 9 or grade 7 or 9. So a lot of learners need to go get help with their tables and graphs. So, but obviously, if they've done them perfectly, then they get the marks. Thank you, Lyndon. And then there's some more information there on the discussion. This is where we want a couple of pages on a senior project, where they're looking at all the patterns, all the data, everything being drawn together to make this incredible document. Limitations and errors, so we've mentioned that, and the recommendations for future research, and of course the conclusion with the key findings. Remember, judges, that the learner is entitled to say that the hypothesis is rejected. There's nothing wrong with that. You don't penalize somebody just because they say that, okay? Because the hypothesis might be rejected, but they've got proof that it wasn't supported, and that's absolutely fine. That is actually very good science. So it's the reading that we do all the time. Okay, thank you, Lyndon. Sorry. The originality, creativity, and value. 12 marks. So now point number 15 is about ethics. So there's no problems, you give the 4. Okay, but now how do you know if there are no problems? You will have done the judge's ethics report. In fact, I recommend the judge's ethics report is done first. We'll get to it because you will find perfect projects literally have no ethical issues. Then, obviously, something that's beyond the scope of the school curriculum, we are going to be looking for an exceptional project that goes outside what is at school. Now, if you're not aware of that, you can always look for a teacher in amongst the judges group and say, okay, is this something, or you might remember your science lessons or your life science lessons. And then lastly, we're looking for something completely novel, new, something amazing. Now, you might find that you give a low score at number 17, but when you speak to the learner, you suddenly know that this is amazing. So you are allowed to go back and change your scores in the written work. That is allowed. Thank you, Lyndon. There are 8 marks simply for the mechanical part of writing, correct referencing in text and at the end. So if there's no in text, you obviously can't give 4. And then the referencing, we expect Harvard. We've asked them to use Harvard, but it doesn't matter if they use another type of referencing as long as they're consistent. And of course, there are 3 references needed on the research plan. Of course, in the report, we want more than 3. The same, we don't want the same 3. That means they've read nothing through the year. And then, of course, the writing and formatting for 4 marks of the research plan, the report, and the abstract. That gives the people who spent hours formatting correctly some marks. Thank you, Lyndon. Right, over to you, Peter.
Good evening, everybody. What we're going to be doing in this section is just briefly comparing the engineering/computer science assessment form with that for the scientific investigation. So if we can move on, please, Lyndon. You'll find I'm not going to include all the sections of the assessment form because there are some which are actually identical across all 4 types of project. Now, if we look first one at the introduction, point number 1, point number 2 are the same as for the scientific investigation. So you start with a need, you start with a problem, and based on that, you describe your overall objectives, in other words, your aim. Then we come to point 3, where all of a sudden we're talking about engineering goals or design goals. My understanding of this is that this rubric is assessing 2 different types of projects, a pure engineering project and a computer science project. The first one is for the engineering project. The design goals normally will apply to a computer science project. Because I like examples. I've just got a quick example of a computer science project that can illustrate the need or problem. You've observed at your school that a lot of learners are struggling to get good marks for maths. So you then decide, and this is your aim, to develop an app to assist the learners in your school to improve their maths marks. Then we come to the design goal. This is where you describe your primary goals. Now, you decide you can't solve everybody's problems all in one go. So you decide you're going to work with grade 12 learners and you want to assist them to improve their geometry marks. That would become your design goal. Right, can we move on, Lyndon? Thank you. In this part, you'll see this section is quite a bit different to the scientific investigation. The first 1.4 describes this strange animal called a design criteria. or it could be a process, could be a program or codes. Design criteria is where you start describing your specific requirements. For example, an engineering project, what materials do you need? How easily are they available? What are they going to cost? You draw up a timeline for how you're going to be carrying out your testing. In the case of computer science problem, they say the math example I used, you decide you're going to use the Python programming language. You decide you want to create a database of questions, which the learners can try, and you provide feedback for them. And you also want to include some links to online resources, such as videos and so on, that they can go and use. Word that's used here is that of a prototype. And this is the design, test, retest cycle that we're going to. And the learners learn about it probably, I think, the first time at school in grade 7, and they carry on with it as their technology learning area up to grade 9. And the expectation would be by the time the project arrives at a regional expo that they would have tried out at least 3 prototypes. You might have noticed if you judged these or looked at these projects at the district expo that possibly there was only 1 prototype. The same would apply to a computer science program. The 2 most common types of projects that you get in the computer science field are those using doing some kind of data analysis, and then there are others where they actually create an app. And both of them it's highly unlikely that you would hit the final application in one go, that you'd have to break it down into steps, test it out, make sure it works, and then do the next bit and put them together and make sure they work together and so on. All right, let us carry on. On the screen, when Olga had the scientific investigation, she actually had a piece taken from the Expo guidebook, which is on the Expo Science website and easily accessible to the learners. And it said things like, this section you're describing what you did, why you did, and how you did it. Now, that's exactly the same for engineering and for computer science. The difference is here you have to explain how you tested the engineering or design goals in order to solve the problem. And the scoring that is here is all done with that in mind. And it culminates with number 14, which is very important. Was your engineering or design goal achieved or not? If it was achieved, you should have sufficient evidence above. If not, the conclusion, you then explain why not. Also mentioned here under method, just going back, is the idea that somebody should be able to repeat what you've done. So your method has to be sufficiently described in sufficient detail for somebody else to go and check, and they can verify or refute what you found. Right, if we can carry on. Thank you. Okay, this is just a quick one. If you are a new judge and you have been allocated to the computer science category, what I would suggest you do is print out a copy of this sheet, take a highlighter and highlight the bits that I have done here, which specifically apply to computer science projects. There are things like they talk about circuits. It's highly unlikely, well, not impossible, but unlikely you're going to have circuit diagrams in a computer science project. But it is quite likely when the learner is describing their algorithm or the process that they're using to solve the problem that they might well have a flow chart. All right, if we can carry on now. Okay, this is just to highlight some of the things that the learners get confused. Their aim and engineering goal are not sufficiently clear. Anyways, the aim is the overall objective. whereas the engineering goal is the primary goal. And you should be able to tell the difference. And there's a big difference between design criteria and the engineering goal. Engineering goal is what you want to do. Design criteria is how you're going to set about doing it. It's a problem if the method cannot be replicated. And that would not only apply to an engineering project, it applies to a scientific method project as well. If somebody else can't go and check how they've tested the hypothesis, then there is a bit of a problem. Sometimes what you find is learners get very carried away with building models or writing lots and lots of code, but they neglect to describe in sufficient detail how they tested it. How did they test their prototypes? I've seen a couple of engineering projects where the child built some kind of a robot, and there was a lot of discussion about the size of the wheels and the chains and the motors and whatever. But this robot was supposed to do something, and nowhere in the project could you find anywhere where it was described how they tested whether it actually worked. And then the results from the prototype testing must always link back to their primary goal, the engineering goal. And then quite often results are not detailed enough. It is the section which counts the biggest score. So the expectation is that the biggest chunk of the discussion would count towards this. And then just before we leave this section, we're going to be talking about ethical issues later. One of them is the question of branding. Just to say that those of you who are assessing computer science projects, mentioning the name of the programming language is not regarded as an ethical violation. The judges marking it will know exactly what programming language it is anyway, so there's no point in hiding it away and saying language 1 or something silly like that. So if they used Python, they say they used Python. Right, let's carry on. Right, now we're going to change gear a little and look at the interview process. If we can carry on. I'm just going to quickly go through a number of points to do with this interview process, and we'll have a little ethical interlude in the middle and then carry on with the points. There are quite a lot of them. So when you get the PowerPoint, you can go and refresh your memory of what's going on. The first one, the judge and learner should be sitting, is not cast in stone. If you are 2 meters tall and the learner is a little picky in grade 6, it would probably be more appropriate if you sat and they stood. And then at least you're more or less at eye level. So the intention is that you are both at around about the same eye level. Please remember to introduce yourself when you arrive at the project. Just tell them who you are. Inform them right off the bat that you have actually read their project and that the interview is going to be 20 minutes. During your pre-judging, it's a very good idea to make notes of things that you want to ask in the interview, something that you might have you're not quite sure what they did, or you want them to give you some more detail. If there wasn't, say, enough detail in their report, the interview is the time to do that. If you are suspicious, and we'll talk about this later, but if you suspect that they might have used artificial intelligence tools in some way, the interview is a good place to actually ask appropriate questions and see if they can explain. And they have a beautiful model, but they can't tell you at all how they built it and what it did. They've just got a photograph of this model. Your judging antenna should be twitching, that there's something not right. Right, let's carry on, please. If you ask a question, this is good teaching practice. Those of you teachers will know this. If you ask a question, you allow the learners time to think, and you wait for them to put their hand up. In the case of an interview, you do the same. You ask them. Don't expect them to come out with an answer straight away. They need to formulate their thoughts. They might be a little nervous at the start of the interview, so give them time. We expect them to refer to their poster, possibly their journal, and in the case of engineering or computer science projects, possibly a model or work on a computer. There is, in fact, a score on the assessment sheet where you give them a mark for how well they actually do refer to their poster and can they use it as part of answering your questions. Some learners, especially engineering type projects, if they've built a model which is too big to bring to the expo, might have a short video to show you the model that they've done actually in operation and what it is doing. When you're coming to the end, like 2-3 minutes, please warn them time is nearly up. Right? Next, please. Yeah, just a couple of ethical things before we move on to stuff which is more like nitty-gritty. Please ensure your cell phone is off or at least on silent. Preferably off, but certainly on silent during the interview. You don't want your phone ringing, and you certainly don't want to stop the interview and answer your phone while you're busy with the interview. Please remember these are learners. Some of them are still quite young, the grade 6s and 7s. So just please be very careful of the language you used. Avoid things which are derogatory, demeaning, or offensive. In other words, it would be totally unacceptable to tell the learner that you think this is a really terrible idea that they've got. You might think that, but keep that thought to yourself. And please avoid disturbances. If your mate walks past and wants to chat to you, ignore them. If another judge comes and wants to look at the project, quickly ask them to push off and come back later. And then this is covered in the code of conduct, but professional behavior is expected from you as a judge. Don't think we need to say any more. Right, let's carry on. Okay, these are sort of more nitty-gritty. At the end, just allow them to make a closing statement. Sometimes they might have questions for you. I like it when they ask you questions, because it means that you actually are engaging properly with them. At the end, thank them for the interview that they've given them, and warn them that the time is now up. But please, a big no-no, don't give any indication of the score. In other words, don't walk away and say, I think this is a gold medal project. Because what will happen is in the morning, the next day after the prize giving, and this learner only gets a bronze medal, Mommy is going to be phoning Thomas to complain. And Thomas does not want that to happen. All right, let's carry on, please. During the interview, remember that you have to have a discussion with your convener at the end, together with the other judge, to arrive at a consensus score. It's a good idea to make some notes during the interview, which can aid you in the discussion. It's also interesting to compare those notes with the other judge to see if they agree or disagree with you. As Olga mentioned earlier, it's okay to go and adjust your other scores once the interview is finished. That's quite in order, though you wouldn't expect a huge change. And then, this has been said already, so we are repeating it, but we need to all hear it. You need to add up the scores and fill in your score out of 100. On the assessment form, you will have seen, hopefully, that there are 2 places where there's a mark out of 100. The one is your score, and the second one is the final score. Don't fill your score in there, please. You will simply have to scratch it out and write something else there. So you might give 85, the other judge might give 60. Hopefully it doesn't happen, and then you will eventually decide the score is 70. And then please remember to hand your sheet to your convener. I'm not sure what Olga is going to do, but she might ask that when you're finished with a score, you take it to your convener straight away and then carry on to your next interview. Right, thank you. That's all from me.
Yes, Peter, thank you very much. Yes, we will be asking as soon as the sheet is finished after the interview, that the sheet will go to the conveners immediately, because they'll start entering the scores. They'll keep your sheets for the discussion. Those sheets, of course, become part of the Expo documentation, evidence that the project was judged. In fact, I looked at last year's score sheets today, and we may only get rid of them the day before Expo. So we actually keep them for a whole year. So please make sure they're completely and utterly filled in. Okay, now the second part of assessment is called the Judge's Ethics Report. And this is very, very important to fill in, to show that you have read it from this the report of the learners from a different point of view. So you're looking to see that they are ethically compliant. And the whole judge's ethics report is a 2-page document with many little criteria. And you would simply, if you find evidence of human testing, you would put an X on the right-hand column. And of course, you'd also look to see if there are permission or supervision letters. So it's quite a complex process. I personally feel, and we used to do this at ISF, that we actually ask the judges to read through the whole project once, then do the judge's ethics report, put it to one side, and then do the assessment sheet. Because while reading through the project in an overall way, you actually get a nice feeling for the project. Now, we don't give you ethics reports back to the learners, but if the learner is selected to go to ISF, and there are 250 projects and only about 14 go to ISF from Cape Town. I don't know what the actual number is this year. We might then go and look at the ethics report and say, okay, here's something that has to change. So it is a confidential document, and please be honest when you fill it in. Thank you, Lyndon. So let's look at the stages of ethics. Right at the beginning of the year, when the learner chose the project and they started working on the research plan, simultaneously, they filled in what's called a learner ethics checklist. It looks almost the same as what you're going to fill in. But please don't be tempted to just go and look at their one. Okay? So they themselves were being taught to choose the project based, hopefully, with no issues, no violations on the learner ethics checklist. So there would be a lot of discussion at school with a teacher or a mentor. And they would then try and get assistance. So obviously we don't like human testing, for example. And they would maybe be swayed to choose a different project. That learner ethics checklist will be in the Expo folder, along with the permission and supervision letters, if relevant. So you might, excuse me, need to go find them. At Expo, the project display and safety approval team goes and literally looks at the display in front of them. They don't check the ethics of the project, which is what you're going to do. But on the table, when you get there on Tuesday morning, you'll actually see the form should be complete and out on the table. That actually gives approval for judging to start. Thank you, Lyndon. And then, of course, you are doing the third stage, which is the judge's ethics report, to see that there is compliance with the rules, the ethical rules of Expo. Thank you, Lyndon. So these are the different subsections of the judge's ethics report, anything that's legal or not. For example, the learner might have been working with some proteas that you might know are actually endangered, and then you find out they bought them at a nursery. So then it's a very different type of violation, or not. They might have done what we all don't like, is human or animal testing. We try to dissuade that, and if they have asked for assistance in a lot of instances, we have tried to move their project to something that is safe to do. There is, especially in social sciences, a possibility of surveys done with vulnerable groups such as minors, in other words, under 18 at school, elderly people, people in specific homes, and so on. All of these are potentially a problem unless the learner got some help, some supervision and so on. Often the learner does experiments, obviously not just chemistry. And then we want to see that a teacher with a BSc has supervised those practicals, those experiments. So it's not that they can't do these experiments and things using some of the issues that you can see on the screen, but did they get help? Did they get support? Did they get permission? Did they get supervision? Now, we definitely clear, or we don't want knives and guns and so on, especially Cape Town. But again, were they using a device under supervision? And often that happens in the garage at home. And then the dad or mum signs the letter and says, I supervised all of this. And that's okay then. That's okay. Some of the violations are about plagiarism. For example, you can see that the introduction looks like it's 5 different fonts. That looks like it's paraphrased, taken straight out of different sources. That's plagiarism. And then there might be health and safety violations. Thank you, Lyndon. So obviously human testing and medical procedures are shown there. Things we don't really want. But if they chose that project at the beginning of the year, January, February, and they saw that there was, for example, some medical procedures, what did they do with that? Now, in the first term, up until just before the district expo, in other words, till the end of April, the schools were given the option to get assistance from us with the issues. And then we could give advice on what to do next. Unfortunately, not everybody did that. At the district expos, there was a project approval team. I don't know if you selectors noticed them or saw them, Linda and them, and they went and did exactly the same thing. They checked for ethical issues and gave advice on how to correct them. Now, we're hoping that there should be none of these at Expo, but you might come across them. Unfortunately, there is some possibility of animal testing, even insects. We don't want any of them. We don't want anything. For example, changing a habitat, starving an animal, starving a human, okay? A lot of experimentation you get off the internet and you think it's okay because it's on, I'm not saying me, a child might get it off the internet and think, well, this looks like it's all right. Then obviously the whole health and safety thing also comes about illegal substances. So we've steered clear of allowing alcohol, drugs, whatever. Now, just to tell you, judges, in case you don't know, that there were 6 workshops between January and April that teachers and learners could attend. So it's not like there wasn't the opportunity to get help. And there are just some more issues there, possibly. Thank you, Lyndon. So the violations that in the written side is often plagiarism. Now, it could be a portion of the introduction. That's not a big violation compared to human testing. Okay, it could be using brand names. Peter talked about one aspect of brand names, but comparing brands shouldn't say the name of the brand. And then, of course, the referencing. So learners are learning a huge amount while doing their Expo project. Hopefully, we've moved away from www.google.com. Okay, but you never know what you're going to meet when you actually read the project. Thank you. Thanks, Lyndon. Okay, so the top of the judge's ethics report looks like that. And then again, you please fill that in. And the idea is that we will get one from you and one from your co-judge, and we will record some of the information on a spreadsheet for follow-up. Thank you, Lyndon. So right at the end of the second page, after you've read all the violations, seen whether there are or not any, you will come across the table at the bottom. So let's say you did not put a single X after reading the project many times, there were no violations. You didn't put any X's, so you would put a little mark on the right-hand side of no violations found. Basically, hopefully both of you say that, and then we know we don't need to follow up. Moderate violations of things like a bit of copying in the introduction. Something small, but it still has to be mentioned. Severe violations are the ones that really concern us. Was there human testing without permission, without supervision? That would be sitting under severe. And of course, the reason you must state. So if you say Project 10101 has a severe violation, you need to say what it is. Otherwise, how do we know? Thank you, Lyndon. So just a warning that the testing on humans and animals is often a place where there are issues. So if you find that there is, then please go to the admin folder, the Expo folder, and look to see at the very bottom, are there permission and supervision letters? If there are, then you might change your violation. If there aren't, then you know what to do. Thank you, Lyndon. And there's just an example there of a really bad project. In order to test a natural energy supplement, learners were prevented from eating any food for 5 hours. They were then fed 20 grams of the natural energy supplement. After 2 hours, the learners completed a survey to determine how they were feeling. Okay, many, many, many issues there. This was taken from an old project, by the way. So you can immediately see that there's something wrong. And again, you'd look for the permission and supervision letters. I'm not sure if any scientist should give permission, but let's see. And then, of course, there's that red flag telling us there's a huge issue there. Now, let's say you come across something in a project and you're not sure. Please ask your convener. Go to your convener. Convener will help you with this. Thank you, Lyndon. Okay, so there's also back on the assessment form. So now you're sitting with the judge's ethics report and the judge's assessment form. And right there, there's an issue with plagiarism and other ethical violations. Could you please transfer it across from the bottom of the judge's ethics report to here? So when the chief judges are looking, for example, at the assessment sheets, they can actually see, is there an issue? And remember what we said earlier, it's quite a long time ago now this evening. Whatever you find, you still continue to assess the project. Thank you. Also, in the second table, sorry, Lyndon, the second part of the table, improvements suggested, please fill those in. And if you're prepared to mentor that learner in case that project goes forward, please put your name and email there. Thank you, Lyndon. So this is the sort of table we fill in. Based on what you've written. Okay, hopefully we have X's all the way across the green where there's no violations, because those learners are then eligible for everything. There's nothing to worry about. They can get any award. 2 to 4 written violations. So 2 paragraphs copied would be one of the 2 to 4. They could get a moderate violation score. Okay. And then lastly, everything that's bad gets a severe. So offensive images, brand names used extensively, more than 4 written violations, plagiarism, no attempt for corrective or preventative measures, and of course, human testing without permission and so on. Those are the ones we as a group have to follow up on. And that is why you also don't have a final score. Because if you have an agreed score and there's a severe violation, there has to be a process for that. Thank you, Lyndon. And there's just some more examples of the violations or transgressions here. 1 or more of the country's laws are broken. Research is obviously involving human or animal testing without permission or supervision. Vulnerable groups are included in the survey and the principal didn't give permission, for example, or the head of the clinic. Obviously, If any dangerous devices were used without supervision and permission, there we go. And of course, the written violations is about copying mainly. So at the end of it, you could actually say, we're not recommending this project. Okay, Peter, would you like to do the slide about the use of AI? Thank you, Peter. Okay, I'll start.
It's okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank
I'm
you,
just
Peter. Thank you, Peter.
finding my way around Teams, which I don't know that well, just to find where the microphone was. Yes, that artificial intelligence is a bit of the elephant in the room at the moment. It's a fairly recent development, what it was a couple of years ago. Initially, I think it was not last year or the year before at ISF, the rule was that AI may not be used at all. And any project that turned up that could be shown to have used AI was actually disqualified, which in some cases probably was a bit unfair. What is important is we have to distinguish, and we'll look at a slide later, between good uses of AI and ones which are unacceptable. In other words, a learner using AI to present a complete finished project is clearly unacceptable. So we need, as judges, to have some kind of understanding of what's going on. You don't necessarily have to have used it yourself, but at least be aware of what's going on. And look, we need to look just at a couple of ideas. How do you decide that it's been used? And what UCT has done, and it was splashed across quite a few websites last week, is that they have stopped using the AI detection tool that they had been using, because they've discovered that it actually is very, very unreliable. So they, in fact, if you're wanting to know, is there a tool to detect whether the learner used AI, the answer is no. The tool is your intellect and your intelligence and your knowledge, and as reliable as that can be. All right. Using AI can fall under the plagiarism category. Sometimes it can't. Okay, can we move on? Okay, this is probably the easiest way to actually see things that are acceptable. They might want to use it to correct their spelling or improve their grammar. This could well be the case of a learner whose home language is not English, and they using an AI tool to make sure that what they've written is in fact grammatically correct. That's okay. They might have a specific problem with a certain aspect of their project, and they use the AI to get some ideas as to how they might sort those problems out. They might want to see what are alternative views on some issue and what research has been done already. That's okay. They can do it by Googling. They can do it by using AI. Either is acceptable. They might have a new concept that they're not sure about that is part of that they've encountered as part of their literature that they've read. Asking an AI tool like ChatGPT, what is this about, is okay. Right, next we look at unacceptable. To do either the whole project or a large chunk of it using AI. To generate a literature review using AI is not acceptable. Using ideas generated by AI, and what it doesn't say here, but passing them off as if they're your own, and then making up data. In other words, if you have a scientific investigation experiment and you use AI to fabricate data for you, or you're doing a social science project and you put the survey questions in and you ask the AI tool to give you possible responses, all of that would be unacceptable. Okay, I think we move on to the next slide.
Thank you, Peter.
Okay, can we
Thanks,
just,
Peter.
something I didn't say
Yeah.
is it's important that the use of AI tools is referenced, and you will find that in the judge's guidebook, which I think if I remember correctly, all the Cape Town region judges have been sent a copy of already.
They have. But if they haven't got it, we're going to show them where to find it at the end.
Okay, good.
Thank you, Peter. What we're hoping to find is that the interview is going to be the place where you might find out more about the use of AI. So if you're suspicious that the child has been using AI, apart from the ability to go and check, you can generally find out in the interview by asking, did you use it, and where did you use it, and how did you use it, and then show me your references. And that immediately comes, it's up there, it's transparent and so on. So let's do it like that. I'm going to ask one of the chief judges, Brandon Collier-Reid, to come and actually talk a bit about the process that they're using at UCT, and possibly some tips, because I think that might be a place where people are going to struggle if you think you found it. So let's look at the judging sheet for the last time. Make absolutely certain, please, that you add up correctly. We once did a survey of old judging sheets, and to our horror, we found that people can't add. So bring a calculator with you, please. I'm not being patronizing. I'm just saying when you're tired in the afternoon, you might find your adding is wrong. Now, what we don't want is the adding to be wrong and a child loses out on something, a gold medal, silver medal, whatever. Okay, so please check that everything is filled in, even if it's a 0 on the side. And then the subtotals all are correctly transferred to the top, and then make the 100. Thank you, Lyndon. So we, of course, the 18th to the 20th of August, that is Cape Town Expo. Now, the projects are going up on Monday, the 18th. The judges are not needed on Monday, the 18th. They're coming in, as I've said earlier, 7 o'clock on Tuesday, 19th, please, and be prepared to spend the whole day. So you can't come and ask if you can leave at lunchtime, or you can leave at 3 o'clock. So that is why I said, if you're not available, please email that judges ctexpo@gmail.com and tell us before the 14th, please, because the 15th we're actually packing, and then we're at Expo on the 18th. So, it's like somebody tried to phone me while I was presenting this evening. A bit difficult. So please, by the 14th, let us know. Elsa is doing the judges admin. She's a fantastic admin person. She's helping me. And please contact her via that judges ctexpo@gmail.com address for any questions you've got. Thank you, Lyndon. So right at the end, we're going to check those scores before you hand the sheets in. You're going to check that both the assessment form and the ethics report are complete. It is absolutely terrible where you later on adding all things up and you suddenly find there's marks missing. Conveners, we're going to ask you, I know there are a lot of conveners here tonight. We're going to ask you to do that before coming to give the results to us as well. Thank you, Lyndon. So the judge will do the judge's ethics report. Please, full names, printed, please, not OP. And then I have to find out who OP is, please. So your full name on the judge's ethics report and the assessment form. Please write comments everywhere. So if there are spaces, please add information there. It's really useful to us to actually be able to have a very good, well-planned assessment sheet. And remember, the project is assessed regardless of the violations you might find. We do need mentors. So basically, we can send out, I think with Save the Date earlier this year, we send out the dates for the upgrades. We will need mentors. I can't tell you which projects are going through. So we don't know in which categories we need mentors. We pretty well always have a computer science project going through and a biomedical. So we will contact you. And then in September, you'll be asked to mentor a project going to ISF. Thank you, Lyndon. We're going to look at the links. Thank you, Lyndon. So a lot of the resources are at exposcience.co.za. Get involved, judges. Okay, so the judges manual is there and the assessment sheets. By the way, somebody commented and said, why is it 2024? It was written for the first time last year. So we're very proud of this new manual. In the past, it was just a Word document. And the idea is that, yes, there might be things that are left out. Please just give me any feedback. So please download it if you didn't get it. And please spend time reading through, because a lot of your questions will actually be answered in the judge's manual. Thank you, Lyndon. Just reminding ourselves, of course, that these are the young learners that we are likely to meet. Some of them are tiny, grade 6. Some of them are big, grade 12. We've got learners from all over Cape Town, the 4 metros. Okay, we have 250 projects. So all the judges that actually are registered, would you please come on the 19th, unless you've already told us you can't be there. And then your convener will manage the process with you. But let's look at some of these kids. I think the top left one is Cape Town. Yes, some of the learners from last year, and that's really nice to see. These are the children whose lives we are going to change, hopefully for the better. Thank you, Lyndon. And now, there are places that you can contact. So as I said, you could contact Thomas, or you can contact me via judgesctexpo@gmail.com with any questions. We prefer emails, please, because I don't know if you know that we're all volunteers with full-time jobs. So the phone isn't necessarily the place we're going to be looking during the day. So emails are much better. And I'm so looking forward to seeing you all on the 18th. I want to thank you for attending tonight. It's been quite a long session, but thank you so much for being part of this session. Thank you, everybody, and good night. Goodbye. Thank you. We love all the hearts and the thumbs up.